Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by SpeedStream. I'm Jim Cardle. First elected in 1988, former chairman of the Health and Human Services Committee and now chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, Harvey Hildebrand says that small business drives the Texas economy. Harvey, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
You are, as I mentioned, a longtime serving member, a big asset to the state of Texas, and in particular now you're chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. We're looking forward to the 2013 legislative session, but if I can first, for our viewers, tell us a little bit about the Ways and Means Committee. Everybody hears about the Appropriations Committee that spends money. Ways and Means helps derive taxes and makes tax policy. Talk about the Ways and Means Committee if you can.
Well, the Ways and Means Committee is, of course, a part of the Texas House of Representatives. The Texas State Constitution grants the power to raise revenue, really any initiating new revenue, new tax policy, creating new taxes, anything like that. The Texas State Constitution places that power in the House of Representatives, not in the Senate. It has to originate in the House. So what happens is the Ways and Means Committee was created many, many years ago, and is a traditional committee. They have the same thing in the U.S. House of Representatives and some other states. Not all states call it the same, but the Ways and Means Committee in the Texas House has the power to originate tax bills and, for that matter, make any new tax policy.
For a couple of years, folks have been talking about redoing the margins tax. There's going to be some budgetary surplus potentially, not the problematic nature before, but as a champion of the taxpayer, according to NFIB, a conservative leader, Texas Association of Business recognized, what are you looking at in terms of approaching this coming session?
Well, we've been working for the last 10 months on an interim study, which means that the Ways and Means Committee meets during the interim between the sessions and ends up having testimony. We've had some public testimony too. We're going to have some more public testimony in September and October.
I'm glad you mentioned that, if I may, because a lot of folks don't realize that you're working while you're not in
work
session.
Year-round. It's a citizens' legislature, so we go back home and live under the laws we make and raise our families and are in business in the communities we live in and that we represent. But tax reform is something we're already working on. Okay. We're looking at every aspect of the tax code. We want to make the tax code fairer. We want to make it simpler. And we want to create incentives for business to invest in the state, to expand the businesses they may already have in the state, to hire more people, and to be more competitive and attract even more business investment from outside the state. We're already the beacon state. We're already quite frankly, beating the brains out of the other states in terms of how much more conservative and how much more successful we are economically and pro-business climate and in terms of our commerce in the state. We're winning that, but we want to do even more. And that's a result of the hardworking Texans, the entrepreneurial spirit of Texans, the fierce independence of Texans, but it's also because they've elected not only good people to represent them, but our founding fathers put together a good government structure in Texas, and it's resulted in conservative fiscal policy in the state for many, many years. And that conservative fiscal policy has led to a very favorable business climate, which has led to a lot of investment in the state. So we're looking at every aspect of the code, but specifically the margins tax, which is the business franchise tax that we have in the state of Texas. I actually voted against it when it came up in 2006.
Okay.
But today, now that we're under it, there's some talk of repealing and then replacing it. Quite frankly, we might end up with something worse. And I'm starting to lean to the idea that let's tweak it, let's refine it, let's make it fair, let's make it simpler. Let's do some things like specifically address the small business exemption. Let's make the small business exemption permanent.
So, for instance, if I may, you're talking about those businesses that have gross revenue of less than $1 million.
Exactly. That's what we have today, but that's this perfect example. We ought to do that. I introduced the bill last time. I passed the extension of the small business exemption that had only been in existence for 2 years. I passed the legislation that extended it 2 more years. I originally introduced the bill to make it permanent, but with the legislative and the financial situation, we ended up making it temporary, so extended it 2 more years. I'm going to introduce a bill this fall to make it permanent.
What would you say to those who are saying that we haven't had enough time yet under the margins tax to come back and revise it? Are you seeing enough
they're wrong.
These
They're wrong.
hearings that you're
They're
holding?
wrong. I think, first of all, not very many people. There were some parties, especially the larger companies, that were behind us changing the franchise tax. Now, quite frankly, there were a lot of us wanting to change it because you had big businesses evading taxes in Texas that they were paying in other states, and there was the Delaware subs and things like that. But once it was clear that we were going to do something different, a lot of the biggest businesses wanted to make sure that their interests were protected, and which is fine. I'm for all business. I'm for small, mid-sized, big, all business. I want all business to invest in Texas. I want all business to employ Texans, and I want to grow the state's economy. And we can help doing that in a number of ways: having predictable and fair regulations, having
big issue.
Cheap power, inexpensive power, and plentiful power. We have some challenges there, but tax policy plays a role too, and that's what I'm working on now. I'm working towards tax reform, being the architect of a tax reform that will make Texas more attractive to business in the state and business outside the state, and fair to all taxpayers in the state. And we're working on that because we need to address some specific issues. Quite frankly, we need to make the small business tax exemption permanent.
Okay.
But we also need to expand it because it only serves those with $1 million of gross revenue or less. So a business that makes grosses $1,050,000 doesn't get it. That's not fair. So we need to look at other ways to bring tax relief and incentivize small business to invest in and expand their businesses. Why not look at businesses that are $5 million in gross revenues, or $10 million, or even 20? So I'm looking at areas of what we can do to maybe have a standard $1 million exemption for those that are between $1 million and $20 million, and use the easy form and even lower that rate. We already have an attractive rate. Making that rate lower and then giving $1 million standard exemption. That's something we're examining.
Because what you're talking about there is essentially it acts as a governor. They will not hire another employee to produce more product to make more money. It's at the margins.
We want them to invest in Texas. The result is if you incentivize business, big, small, and in between, and I'm a small business person. I come from a small business background. And the small business is the backbone of Texas and the backbone of this country. But we need all sizes of business to invest in Texas. And so we need a strong tax policy that incentivizes all sizes of business to invest in Texas. And that's what's behind this. But also we need to address the pass-through, making sure that all businesses are treated the same about gross revenue that passes through when they pay out a sub or they pay out an expense that it gets
talking about a subcontractor
that allow it to be deducted. Some businesses get to do it and some don't. That's not fair. We need to make sure that all businesses are treated the same on pass-through issues. On cost of goods, we need to allow more businesses, or if not all businesses that are in that particular class of business or that they've chosen to use cost of goods, that they're treated the same. So it's another thing that we can make it fairer and simpler by making sure it applies to everybody the same. And then we could look at the retail definition. The retail definition, you'll have businesses that sells equipment, another one that leases equipment, another one that rents equipment, and then another one that does all three, and they're all treated differently. We need to treat them the same. And so there's things like that we're looking at that'll make the entire business franchise tax simpler, but also fairer, and it will result in businesses expanding their operations, investing in the state, and employing more people. That's good for Texas, and it will result in more revenue to the state without raising taxes.
Can't argue with that. Sounds like a plan, and you're moving forward. Representative, we appreciate you coming in.
So what we're going to work on next session, we're doing the work that we need to do now to be prepared to do that job next legislative session.
Well, we're going to be interested in having you back as we get closer to the legislative session, folks. State Representative Harvey Hildebrand out of Kerrville, House District 53, Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Be sure and tune back in to Texas Insider TV. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle.
Second, what? Oh, just everything. So you're going to cut that down to 10. Well, you got some good material.